Tonight, I want to tell you about a place. It isn't hidden deep in the mountains, and it isn't a restricted or sealed-off area. It's simply a standalone house sitting on a hillside by the sea, with an exterior that looks completely ordinary. But this very house has been quietly avoided by locals for years. Some people who lived there later suffered mental breakdowns. Others moved in and soon ran into serious trouble. There were even television crews who entered the house to film paranormal programs, only to abandon the shoot midway through. Tonight, we're going to start from the beginning and take a closer look at why this place came to be known as the Yeongdeok Haunted House. Yeongdeok itself is actually a place that has nothing to do with horror. It's located in the southeastern part of South Korea, facing the Sea of Japan, with a long stretch of coastline. On clear days, you can see the ocean stretching endlessly into the distance. Every year, many visitors drive here on purpose, simply to enjoy fresh seafood or take a walk along the shore and relax for the day. Yeongdeok Haunted House is located on a hillside near the coast, and its position is, in fact, very desirable. From the front of the house, you can look down over the beach and the shoreline below. If this were just an ordinary seaside villa, it would easily be the kind of home many people dream of living in. But as time passed, the house began to feel increasingly out of place compared to its surroundings. The exterior walls became worn and weathered, the windows broken, and the building remained unoccupied for long periods. Whether during the day or at night, it gave off an unsettling sense of distance and discomfort. To the locals, it stopped being just a house long ago and instead became a place that everyone silently agreed to avoid. Regarding why the Yeongdeok Haunted House came to be the way it is, the most widely circulated and earliest local explanation has nothing to do with ghosts or spirits, but instead traces back to a real historical event. The story goes back to the early stages of the Korean War in 1950. As the situation on the battlefield rapidly deteriorated, South Korean forces were forced to retreat. In order to buy time to reorganize their defenses, the military carried out diversionary operations along several coastal areas. One of those locations included the coastline around Yeongdeok. One of these landing missions was not carried out by regular troops, but by a unit temporarily formed from students. According to later accounts, the average age of these youths was only in their mid-teens. Many of them had been students just days earlier, with little to no formal military training, before being sent directly into combat. The outcome of the operation was devastating. Within a short period of time, a large number of these student soldiers were killed on the beach and on the nearby hillsides. Because the fighting was chaotic and resources were limited, there was neither enough manpower nor time to conduct proper burials. Some bodies were buried where they fell, while others were only hastily covered, and many burial locations were never properly recorded. After the war ended, the area gradually returned to normal. Tourism began to develop again, and daily life resumed. However, this chapter of history was never widely discussed. As time passed, what had happened seemed to be deliberately forgotten, slowly fading from public memory. According to later rumors, the Yeongdeok Haunted House was built within one of the hillside areas where these student soldiers had once been buried. For those who believe in feng shui and the energy of the land, such locations are considered extremely inauspicious, as the ground is believed to hold a large number of deaths that were never properly laid to rest, along with the strong sense of regret tied to them. There is no official documentation to confirm this account, but it became the starting point for all the strange events that followed. Because of this, when people mention the Yeongdeok Haunted House, what often comes to mind is not the house itself, but a buried tragedy beneath it, one that was never properly acknowledged. After the Yeongdeok Haunted House was built, the first people to officially move in were a local married couple. Their reasons for purchasing the house were fairly simple. The area was quiet, the environment pleasant, it had a sea view, and the price was relatively reasonable. By all appearances, it didn't seem like a problematic choice at all. For the first period after moving in, everything appeared normal. That changed one night when they began waking up repeatedly in the middle of the night to strange sounds. The noises weren't particularly loud, but they were clear, footsteps outside the house, moving slowly, one step at a time. The unsettling part was that there was no one outside. Over time, the sounds began to change. Sometimes it was no longer just footsteps, but faint voices mixed in, young voices, as if several youths were speaking quietly to one another. No matter how hard they tried to listen, they couldn't make out what was being said. It felt as though the voices were separated by a wall or by a layer of water. Even more disturbing were the moments late at night when the sounds seemed to come from the direction of the sea. At times, they resembled low groans or suppressed cries. The noises never lasted long, but whenever they occurred, the couple found themselves unable to fall back asleep. At first, they tried to explain everything rationally. They told themselves it might be the wind, the sound of waves, or simply exhaustion causing their imagination to run wild. But gradually, the strange occurrences began to move from outside the house to the inside. Appliances inside the house would turn on and off by themselves without being touched. Doors that had been firmly shut before bed would be found half open the next morning. Sometimes, when they heard noises at night and went to check, the living room and hallway would be completely empty. Any one of these incidents on its own might not have seemed terrifying, but as they happened again and again, an overwhelming sense that something was wrong began to set in. The moment that made the couple realize the situation was serious occurred in the early hours of one morning. That night, the wife got up to use the bathroom. As she passed through the living room, she instinctively glanced toward the sofa and froze. Sitting on the sofa were several figures. They appeared young, thin in build, all with their heads lowered. They didn't speak or move. The lighting was dim, and their faces couldn't be clearly seen, yet their presence felt unmistakably real. The wife was so frightened that she couldn't make a sound. She immediately turned and ran back to the bedroom to wake her husband. When the husband came out with a flashlight to check the living room, the sofa was empty. The house was completely silent, just as it had been before, as if nothing had happened at all. Prolonged insomnia and fear quickly took a toll on their mental state. Whether they considered moving away, sought help through feng shui practitioners, or tried to ignore the situation entirely, nothing improved. In the end, the couple became too afraid to stay. One night, they packed only their most basic belongings and left the house without telling anyone. It was after this incident that the Yeongdeok Haunted House was first labeled as a place where something had clearly gone wrong. After the first owners moved out, the Yeongdeok Haunted House was not immediately demolished or sealed off. Instead, it remained abandoned for a long period of time. And because of this, it began to attract people who had nowhere else to go. According to one widely circulated version of the story, a young couple struggling financially eventually moved into the abandoned house in secret. They could no longer afford rent and had no other place to stay, so they chose to use the empty house as temporary shelter. Neither of them strongly believed in paranormal stories, and they assumed that as long as they ignored such things, nothing would happen. At first, life there appeared relatively calm. The house was old and run down, but at least it provided a roof over their heads. After some time, however, changes began to appear in the woman. She often told her boyfriend that every night she dreamed of a very young man wearing an old-style military uniform who spoke to her in her dreams. The conversations in these dreams were never very clear. The figure repeatedly spoke about being cold, lonely, and forgotten. At first, the boyfriend dismissed it as stress or recurring nightmares and didn't take it too seriously. But as time went on, the woman's condition noticeably worsened. Her emotions became extremely unstable. At times she would fall into long periods of silence, while at other moments she would suddenly burst into laughter. She seemed increasingly detached from reality. Her reliance on the figure that appeared in her dreams gradually became stronger than her connection to her real-life partner. Eventually, the woman began claiming that the soldier no longer appeared only in her dreams, but was now waiting for her in certain corners of the house. The boyfriend grew uneasy, but he no longer knew how to respond or what to do. The story reached its tragic conclusion one night. When the boyfriend returned home, he discovered that the woman had taken her own life inside the house. No explanation was left behind. All that remained was an unnaturally silent building. The man did not attempt to investigate what had happened, nor did he explain the incident to anyone. Early the next morning, he left Yeongdeok and never returned. And within the Yeongdeok Haunted House, another tragedy, one that could never be verified, yet continued to be passed down, was added to its growing legend. As the rumors continued to spread, the Yeongdeok Haunted House eventually caught the attention of the media. In South Korea, there are many television programs focused on paranormal exploration, and this house naturally became one of their targets. According to crew members who later spoke about the experience, the filming did not go smoothly from the very beginning. Despite bringing fully prepared equipment and spare batteries, once they entered the house, the power levels of the cameras and audio devices drained at an unusually fast rate. In some cases, the batteries were already showing low power before filming had even properly begun. Even more unsettling was what appeared during audio playback. The recording equipment picked up voices that no one on site remembered speaking. The voices sounded young and subdued, with the words pressed low and indistinct. The content couldn't be clearly understood, but it was certain that the voices did not belong to any member of the crew. In an attempt to continue filming, the production team invited a locally well-known psychic to accompany them into the house, hoping to receive some form of guidance. At first, everything seemed relatively calm, until the group reached the second floor. As they approached one of the rooms, the psychic suddenly stopped. His face turned pale, and his body began to shake visibly. Pointing ahead, he warned the crew in a trembling voice not to take another step forward. He said that inside the room, there were not just one or two presences, but a large number of entities tangled together, unable to leave. The resentment was so intense that it no longer felt like individual spirits, but a single mass formed from many combined together. Before he could finish speaking, the psychic began to lose control. He started vomiting, his breathing became rapid, and then he suddenly ran down the stairs and out of the house. No one dared to follow him, and filming was immediately halted. Afterward, the production team chose to broadcast the incident exactly as it had occurred. Once the episode aired, the name of the Yeongdeok Haunted House spread rapidly, transforming it from a local rumor into one of the most infamous haunted locations known nationwide. And because of this, no television network has since been willing to enter the house lightly for filming again. Of course, everything that is said to have happened at the Yeongdeok Haunted House has never received any official conclusion. Some believe that all of the strange incidents can be explained through psychological suggestion, environmental stress, and collective fear. A house that has been abandoned for a long time, combined with coastal humidity and sound reflections, can easily cause people to misinterpret what they hear and see. But the problem is this: whether it was the homeowners, the young couple, or the television crew, the experiences they described all pointed toward the same kind of presence, something young, suppressed, and unable to leave. If after hearing this story, you have your own interpretation, or if you've heard other versions of the Yeongdeok story, feel free to share them in the comments below. Next time, we'll travel together to another forgotten place,